Okay, you guys, let's talk about Alex PrettI. Is anyone really shocked? I mean, is anyone truly surprised that a guy who brings a loaded 6-hour to a protest and gets in a fight with ICE winds up dead? Hello? This is America. When has that ever worked out? And look, this isn't a partisan issue, okay? This isn't about Democrats versus Republicans or left versus right. This is about common sense. This whole thing could have been easily prevented, and I think we all know that, whether or not we want to admit it. Is that victim blaming? I don't know. Can we even call him a victim? I mean, yes, okay, he's a victim in the dictionary sense of the word, but...
New video circulating online shows Alex PrettI's scuffle with federal immigration officers just days before he was fatally shot in Minneapolis. Video of the earlier encounter, recorded on January 13th by the News Movement, shows PrettI apparently yelling at a Ford SUV. As the vehicle begins to pull away, PrettI kicks and breaks one of its rear taillights. The vehicle then stops, and a federal officer jumps out of the back seat. The officer rushes towards PrettI and tackles him. The officers eventually let go of PrettI, and he walks away. PrettI appears to have a gun holstered in his waistband in the footage.
It kind of looks like that guy was asking for it for a while. Didn't he actively take steps to put himself in the worst possible situation? And if he did, then isn't he at least partly responsible for what happened? And I'm not saying ICE is blameless. I'm saying that there's enough blame to go around. And there's a lot to break down and question before getting riled up, because this isn't the shocker the media is trying to turn it into, which makes me wonder, what aren't they telling us? And what are the real issues that this is distracting us from? Let's get into it. Okay, so what do we know? Well, we know that PrettI brought a loaded 9mm 6-hour semi-automatic weapon and extra ammunition to a very tense protest where there had already been a civilian casualty. And we know that he had a legal permit to carry it. From the numerous videos shot in many different perspectives of the scene that day, what happens next seems pretty cut and dry. ICE agents shove a woman to the ground. PrettI goes toward her to, I guess, help her up, and puts himself in direct physical contact with the agents. And it appears that at some point, one or more of the agents saw that he was carrying. We know this because we can see an agent dressed in gray take the weapon and remove it from the scene, just as another agent opens fire on PrettI and kills him. That's what the videos show us.
But at least 4 different videos of the encounter, analyzed by NBC News, appear to show PrettI with a phone in his hand in the moments before his death, attempting to come to the aid of a woman pushed to the ground by federal agents. An agent pepper sprays him before PrettI is brought to the ground. Some of the video shows an agent appearing to reach into the skirmish and remove a gun that looked like PrettI's. Then, PrettI is shot.
But sadly, Kristi Noem didn't watch those videos before running off at the mouth and making some pretty wild claims, calling PrettI a, quote, domestic terrorist who had brandished his weapon and attacked the agents, quote, wishing to inflict harm on these officers, with zero proof, but a lot of conviction.
This individual who came with weapons and ammunition to stop a law enforcement operation of federal law enforcement officers committed an act of domestic terrorism. That's the facts.
And instead of taking the opportunity to walk that crazy official narrative back a little bit and say, you know, guys, we're still going through the evidence and we still have to investigate this, but we'll keep you guys updated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Gregory Bovino doubles down on Noem's statement, again asserting that Noem was, quote, 100% spot on in what she said. I swear, you can't make this stuff up. Silly Kristi. She should have known that it was all a setup and that she'd get thrown under the bus the second things went sideways. And Bovino too, because we all know how this works. Someone's hired to do a job that nobody else wants to do and say the things that nobody else wants to say. Then they're given enough rope to hang themselves, and when things finally go wrong, as they obviously must, then they're the scapegoat. Mission accomplished, and the administration gets to save face because they addressed the issue. As expected, Bovino was fired and Noem was demoted. Of course they were. There's absolutely nothing surprising about any of this. As I said before, there is no proof that PrettI brandished a weapon. But did he assault federal officers? I don't know. I guess it would depend on your perspective. As an onlooker, it might have seemed that he was just trying to help a woman up from the ground. But as an ICE agent, trained in combat, who sees this guy suddenly approach, get physical, and then noticing that he's armed, it could have looked completely different. Did ICE have the right to shove a woman to the ground? We don't know, because we don't know what happened right before people started recording. Was it a move? Yeah, of course it was. No one's contesting that. Did PrettI have a right to get involved? Well, obstructing or interfering with ICE is a crime. So no, he had no legal right to interfere. But I guess you could make an argument that he could interfere if he was willing to be prosecuted. But that doesn't mean that prosecution is all you'll have to worry about, especially if you're armed. So did ICE have a right to choose PrettI? If it's in self-defense, did they not? But then how could it be self-defense if the officer in gray had already removed the weapon? Easy, because maybe he didn't communicate it fast enough or at all. Or maybe he did, but nobody heard him. It could literally be anything, because in high-stress situations, especially when there are weapons involved, adrenaline narrows our focus to the threat at hand, not on whatever anybody else is saying.
A brand new angle of the lead up and the shooting of Alex PrettI by federal agents. And what you're about to see is video from a woman who was sitting inside her car, mere feet from where this incident happened. This is the first time that we can hear, at least a little bit, what led up to this deadly confrontation. All right, so this is the start of the confrontation. What I hear in the video, which we just received, are two men arguing. One is certainly PrettI, the other is an agent. One says, "Do not push them into the traffic." The other responds, "I'm pushing them away from traffic." It's unclear exactly, can't prove exactly who's talking. But this is the first time that we've seen and heard what led up to the violence and just how quickly it unfolds right in front of us here. And as also another view of the agent pushing a woman with the backpack on, and it's still unclear why the agent is pushing her. And you are seeing it through the lens, literally, of a person parked right in front of all this. We also can hear agents yelling the word gun 4 times in roughly 4 seconds leading up to the sound of the first shot. Minutes later then, she keeps rolling. This panicked woman in the car videotaping, she says that she's scared to an agent who addressed her calmly, calling her ma'am, and saying she has to move to make room for medical there at the scene. Another agent is heard yelling then at the woman in the car and swearing at her for her to leave as she's driving away.
2 psychological effects of group mentality, whether it's a mob or a troop of soldiers, is number 1, de-individuation, where people lose their self-awareness and their sense of personal responsibility. And B, polarization, where the emotions of the group intensify. A lot of things can happen in this fog of war, if you will. And anyone who's ever been in a fight or in a chaotic situation already knows this. And yeah, maybe an investigation will prove that ICE completely failed somehow. But what difference will that make to PrettI or to his family? Arguing that PrettI had a constitutional right to bear arms is a moot point. Okay, yeah, sure. He had a legal right, but this isn't about rights. It's about outcomes. And there are way too many examples of why this was a dumb move for any American to pretend that they couldn't have predicted the outcome, including PrettI. On July 5th, 2016, Baton Rouge PD responded to a call about a guy selling CDs outside of a convenience store that had threatened another guy with a gun. Officers arrived, but when they tried to arrest Alton Sterling, he resisted, and a struggle ensued on the ground. The police later said that he was reaching for his waistband, so they shot and killed him. And they found a loaded .38 caliber revolver in his back pocket. Sure, PrettI didn't reach for his gun. And yeah, unlike PrettI, Sterling was a convicted felon and couldn't legally carry a gun. But guess what? Police don't have legal status scanners embedded into their brains that activate in a split second during a fight. They don't know who's carrying legally. They don't know anyone's intent. The only thing they can assess is capability. Can this person kill me right now? Yes or no? And if they even suspect that the answer is yes, officers immediately go from a detain and sort it out later mindset to a neutralize the immediate threat mindset, because that's what they've been trained to do. That's what anyone would do. You guys already know, I'm no Trump fan, but the NRA's reaction to his statement that, quote, you can't walk in with guns is bonkers. This is just common sense. But somehow it became politicized, and it caused the NRA to lose its mother-loving mind and put out their own statement that leaders should wait for an investigation instead of, quote, demonizing law-abiding citizens. But no one is demonizing PrettI. He wasn't evil. He was just stupid. No matter how sterling his character or how much nursing he'd given to veterans, it doesn't matter, because this isn't about who deserves what and when. These things don't happen because of a person's character. They happen when circumstances make them possible. That's it. There's a massive gap between what civilians are allowed to do and what officers are trained to do. Rights don't change reaction speed, and the Constitution doesn't slow adrenaline. So what was he thinking? That he'd get away with it? Because what? Both Noem and Bovino screwed up. Their premature comments were too bold to walk back, which destroyed their public image and jeopardized ICE's mission. ICE likely screwed up the communication that day, but I guess we'll find out more after an investigation, so we'll see. And PrettI? He definitely screwed up. Like I said, there's plenty of blame to go around. Which then makes me wonder if all this outrage in Minneapolis isn't orchestrated. Because while everyone's focused on PrettI, U.S. equities tanked on January 20th. Gold is trading at over $5,400 at the time of this recording. But strangely, the price of copper is also on the rise. This isn't good. Gold goes up when the dollar goes down, but copper goes up when industry, and therefore the dollar, are strong. The fact that both gold and copper are increasing together is a red flag. Tier 1 capital ratios are how much capital a bank holds, which indicates how much wiggle room it has to cover its losses without going bust. Smart practice, right? But regulators are now in the process of decreasing capital rules by almost 2% for the 29 global systemically important banks, G-SIB banks like JP Morgan. Did we learn nothing from 2008? Why would they do this? We're told that the 4.5% unemployment rate is, quote, historically low, but that's just not true. In January 2025, the rate was 4%. It's not going down at all. And that's not even addressing the 8.4% underemployment rate, where wages aren't keeping up with inflation. That rate was 7.5% this time last year. How stupid do they think we are? The World Economic Forum just wrapped up its annual meeting. And while we're being led to believe that, world leaders are struggling to figure out their place in this new world order, I'm not buying it. Look, I get it. The masses need a narrative to make sense of what's coming, but I'm pretty sure that they've already figured it out. And whatever happened at Davos was just pure theater. Trump's actions in Venezuela are derailing, as is that whole Greenland thing. And the ongoing DC battles over DHS funding will probably cause yet another government shutdown. These events are real, and they affect all of us. And yet, no one's talking about them. See, this is why it's important to know history. In 1970, the National Guard were called into Kent State, where unarmed students were protesting the escalation of the Vietnam War into Cambodia. The Guard opened fire on these students, killing 4 and wounding 9. And suddenly, the nation's attention shifted away from the encroaching recession, the tensions in the Middle East, the Cold War negotiations, and ironically, even away from the military expansion into Cambodia, which is what started that whole thing to begin with. All anybody talked about was the shootings at Kent State. See how that works? A country can only emotionally process one crisis at a time, so everything else kind of becomes background noise. You know what I mean? Now, I'm not saying that PrettI was killed just to cover up the real issues. I'm just noticing a pattern. And you've got to admit, the timing of violent domestic events is a bit convenient. Do with that what you will. Another thing I don't get is why there's so much backlash against ICE all of a sudden. Clinton, Bush, and Obama all had high deportation rates. At 3 million formal deportations, Obama was known as the deporter in chief. But from 2017 to 2021, Trump only deported 1.5 million. His numbers dwindle compared to his predecessors. So what's all this outrage really about? I've heard some people say, well, it's not about the deportations per se, it's more about the way that ICE carries out its mission. But if that's true, then why won't Minneapolis allow its police department to assist ICE? Because that would stop the needless interactions between protesters and ICE agents, and it would avoid all these types of situations. There are way too many holes in this narrative. Make it make sense. If there's anyone I feel sorry for, it's PrettI's parents. My heart truly goes out to them. But if I'm totally honest, I'm not even sure we can call this a tragedy. Yes, it's unfortunate, but tragedy usually defines a heartbreaking event that couldn't have been prevented, like a tsunami, for example. But this was totally preventable. In my opinion, whoever enters an explosive, police-active environment while armed and picks a fight or a struggle or a confrontation with the officers or with the agents is asking for it. Whether fair or not, once officers perceive a weapon during a struggle, the outcome curve narrows fast. The law might ask, was he allowed to carry? But the street asks, could he shoot right now? And in a split second, the street always answers first. See you on the next vid.